Hello, I am Reverend Irene Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to Generationally Speaking. Here at the table, we come and we discuss life issues, no matter what they might be. As we sit at the table with each generation, we all learn, we all grow, we all are inspired.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Generationally Speaking. Hello, let me welcome you to Generationally Speaking. It is here at the table where we all sit together from all ages, all ethnics, all backgrounds, and we learn from each other. Well, I'm always excited, as you know, to have my special guest, and today I have a group of women who've written a leadership book, and it's an anthology. And for you, my audience, you might be asking yourself, Reverend Smith, what is an anthology? Well, listen, if you pick up the Bible, let me tell you, that's an anthology, okay?
Yes, it is.
What is it? It's a different writers who come together and they're writing with a central purpose in mind. So today, listen, get your tea, get whatever you're taking notes on, and get ready to be inspired, informed, and at the end of it, guess what? You're going to be transformed. So let me jump right in and welcome Dr. Jennifer Jones Bryant to Generationally Speaking. Welcome, excited about having you and your anthologists here today. And I know that you are the visionary for this book, Step into Leadership Greatness, Be a Force Multiplier, Elevating Others to New Heights. Let me begin by asking you to share with my audience those formative years. What shaped you into the woman that we see seated here before us today?
Oh my goodness, the formative years. I will say that I was surrounded by so much love from my mom's side of the family, my dad's side of the family. Oh my goodness. Both my parents were from South Carolina, and they met at a very young age. And so my dad wanted to marry my mom, and my mom was strong-willed, and they eloped, came to D.C., and my brother was born, and then I was born, and we went on from there. And then we had a tragic shift, whereby my mom lost the love of her life, and in a terrible, terrible construction accident. And back then, I bring this up for a reason. Back then, it was one of those things where you had to go identify the body. And that was horrific, right, for my mom. And my mom had a 5th grade education, and she had to raise my brother and I on her own. And so my formative years, I just remember her and her struggle. But she had such high emotional IQ to survive this world with her 5th grade education and losing the love of her life and the person who was foundational for her, right, in terms of financial and all of that, and her having to figure it all out. So fast forward, around the age of 17, I noticed a huge shift in my mom. And I didn't know what it was, what she was diagnosed with, but I knew something wasn't right. And later learned that she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar, to the point where she threatened to kill me. And she threw bullets against my locked door. And so at the age of 17, I had to leave home quickly and swiftly. And it was just one thing after another in terms of trauma. And I had to figure it out. But I had great leaders who were in my life. I had friends. I had family members. And I didn't really talk about it. I just buried myself in my education, going to school at night. My only sibling was incarcerated for a period of time. He got incarcerated twice. But he turned himself around, became a minister, and gave back. My mom and brother are no longer here, right? And so it's been over a decade now. So I had to figure out, like, what's my purpose?
Yeah.
You know, I spent my life as, you know, the formative years, etc., trying to figure it out and waiting for the other shoe to drop. So living on, I was functionally depressed myself and walking around with high anxiety, just trying to figure it out.
You know, Dr. Bryant, you bring up your journey is reflective of so many persons because the emotional swings that your life took. Because when you first started sharing your life with us, it was this effervescent. It was like everything is so good.
Yes.
And my parents, I had my mother and my father, and you had us right there. We was like,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
But then you took that swing on us, and that's how life is. Life does swing on us. And you talked about, you know, your mother having, you know, lost the love of her life, her husband, her soulmate, her other anchor, you know, the person that she was going to build a life with, and now having experienced this tragedy. And, you know, we don't know, you know, we have no way of knowing how that really impacted her. And then having to raise children on a fifth grade education, which meant her income was limited. It meant she, you know, had left South Carolina and here in another area, and you gotta, you know, we have a community, but in our hometown we really have a community. But when we come outside, and to hear her struggle, and then to get this diagnosis, and then you said something about bullets and those, that's trauma.
Oh, I didn't know what that was called, right? When I was going through
Yes.
it, I just was like, oh, that was scary. and trying to figure out, like, where am I going to live? How am I going to finish high school? And she had gotten remarried. And I'm not sure if she, like, buried all of her emotions, and when she got remarried, it just did something to her. It did something. It triggered some things.
Right. I think, you know, that as people of color, we often don't recognize our trauma. I know for myself coming up, you know, my father died when I was very young, and my mother raised us. And my mother buried herself in drinking. She that was her medication. And as a result of her medication, I became an overachiever.
Yep.
And I think people don't recognize these swings that happen to us. And as a part of becoming an overachiever, you know, it's best, good at this, good at the good. Why? Because I was running from accepting what I had experienced in my life. And I'm just thankful to hear you say, you know, to share this part of your journey with us. But we see you today.
Amen.
You did the work.
Yeah, the hard work.
The hard work. So tell us a little bit about what was the catalyst behind publishing this anthology?
So this is actually the third one in the series.
Okay.
Yeah, Step into Leadership Greatness. And I will say this, typically when you're in your 20s, you're trying to figure this thing out, right? And you're trying to figure out your career, your next move. And then when you get in your 30s and 40s, you got your stride going a little bit, right? And you trying to get them promotions, and you climbing the ladder. You doing what you got to do. But baby, when you hit 50, truth serum start happening, right? And then, you know, you start having talks with yourself, and you're like, what is all of this about? And then it becomes about legacy building. And so this book is about legacy building, right? It is about how can I elevate others? How can I bring others along while I lift, while I climb, right? And it's incredibly important. We had trailblazers, and ahead of us, right? Dr. Angela Meyer, how she talked about lifting people while you climb, and you got Martin Luther King who talked about life's most urgent and persistent question is, what are you doing to help others? So this book is mainly about that. And the other pivotal point about this book is that I wanted to find a way to honor my mom. So I actually am, in addition to being the executive founder of Reaching Within, an empowerment journey where I help others untap their leadership potential, particularly career women. But Step Into Leadership Greatness Foundation is a nonprofit, and we are honoring younger people, right? Because I knew what my 17-year-old struggle was, right? And a lot of these young people walking around, we don't know their stories. We don't know their stories. So we're going to honor awarding some young students this year with scholarships.
Great.
Right? With scholarships.
I love the fact that you said, I'm going to honor my mom.
Yeah.
Which meant that, there came a point where you understood my mother had her issues that she had no control over.
Yeah.
And I've forgiven her, and I understand it as best I can, and I move forward. Some people never let go of it.
They don't, and they stay stuck, and it's something called loving someone through it, and it's the unconditional love. She was my first example of learning how to love people unconditionally. Yeah.
Well, when I read the book, and here it is right here, I asked myself, how did you manage to assemble such a diverse group of authors?
The industry leaders, the experts that are out there. Oh my goodness. Some of the authors, we have been in different anthologies together already. We are great friends. I see their impact in the community. I see their impact across the world. When I pulled each of the anthologies together, I personally shoulder tap people because I wanted folks to see the diverse look of leadership. So we have folks who are from, media, we have folks from the federal government, we have folks from public health, we have folks for academia, corporate, federal government, as I mentioned, and people need to see different, age groups, different looks, right? Different industries to make it to know that they can see themselves in terms of relatability in the book.
Amen. Well, I always say that women of color, we are doing it.
Yes, we are.
And it's time for us to acknowledge each other and celebrate each other in this season. So I'm excited about this group of women that you have. What is your mission for this book?
This mission, it goes back to almost the title, right? And looking at the purpose and focusing on what is your big why. And I always talk about that because your big why has to be bigger and larger than your ego. And the mission of this book is moving away from the individual achievements to focus on the collective and collaborative success. And when people pick up this book, because we've had international folks, we had some, if you read the book, and you said you did, we had supporters and endorsements from the UK, all around the world, and they are seeing themselves in this, and they're like, okay, how can I help others? What is it that I can do to help lift others? And the mission of the book is to provide the strategies, the tips, and the tools to equip leaders so they can show up better.
I like that. So as we move forward to our first anthology author, share your contact information if people want to get in contact with you.
Absolutely. On social media platforms, I can be reached at Dr. Jennifer Jones Bryant. And then my website is reachingwithinempowerment.com. And my nonprofit is Step Into Leadership, greatnessfoundation.com. So that's my contact.
All right, we're going to make sure that we have that information up so that if you want to contact Sister Dr. Bryant, you'll be able to
You
do
can call
that.
me sister.
No, I'm-
you call me sister.
No, let me
Look,
tell
my
you.
foundation is in the church.
Let me just say this. I've learned when folk have worked hard for their degrees, it ain't personal. They just worked hard for it and they deserve to be honored. So I'm going to make sure I put the doctor on it, okay?
But I also have humble beginnings
Okay.
too. So it's
Well-
not about the title.
All right. So our first writer is no stranger to Generationally Speaking, and that's Ladrine Howard Peterson. Ladrine.
Yes.
Ladrine,
Yes.
let me welcome you back to Generationally Speaking.
Thank you so much.
And you have authored several books. So tell us a little bit about the other books that you've authored. And I know that you just completed or getting ready to complete a degree program or a program for trauma. So talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And it ties right into what Dr. Jennifer Bryant shared in terms of what she's gone through. So my area and my life has been no stranger to grief and trauma. Heavily on the grief side and so close within the last 5 years. And doing so, as I felt myself feeling a certain way and really feeling the blessing and the grace of God as well, I felt that it was necessary to dig deeper into that area of grief. So with that, I found it, actually it really magically appeared in my inbox, a scholarship program to go through a trauma certification program, and I've been doing it for 3 years. I actually will complete my last class in July of this year. But not going too deep into that, but that's what led me into the major portions of my writing. I've written about leadership, I've written about dreaming your dream, but my last writings have been about grief. Very heavy topic, but very necessary. So the visionary and author of We All Grieve Differently, and then the solo author of We All Heal Differently, the journal. And then coming at the end of this month, I have a book that's coming out, and it's called Little Hearts, Big Emotions. Mm-hmm. And it's for ages 5 through 8 who are grieving. When I saw my grandson grieve, it was like words that we were trying to find for him. And I watched his journey, and I just took note of it, and I documented it in a children's book. So that will be coming out at the end of this month.
So what was it about this ask to be one of the authors that made you say yes to Dr. Bryant's request?
So this is a smiley question because the yes was so easy. It was the easiest yes that I could have imagined. Dr. J and I have been just partnering for so long, and ever since the first instance of her book project, I have been trying to say yes to it, but my projects, my schedule, my timing, nothing would ever align, and I just could not believe it. So this third time around, hey, we said third time's a charm. I said, you provide me with the timeline, and I'm going to adjust my life and my work and my project around it to make it happen.
I didn't give up.
And neither did I. And so we made it work. But Reverend Smith, here's the thing about it. If you look at the cover of that book and you look at the title of my chapter, they so align. And I was like, after I didn't see the cover before I had submitted my chapter. And when it came, she was like, ha ha. She was like, you are the bookend for a reason. And we'll go into the actual chapter of the book. But it was easy to say yes to Dr. J. She's very professional. And she just had a way of operating in excellence. And there's so many things that we share in common, not only HR, human resources management, but so many other things. So this was one of the easier yes, and please take my money, no payment necessary. Here, take this check, like we're going to do it. So excited to be a part of this project.
Well, your section is titled The Leadership Puzzle, Every Piece Counts. And I took note of that because a puzzle is easy to put together if you have a picture of it, what the end result is going to look like.
Yeah.
I bought a puzzle recently, and it had no picture.
Mm.
No picture, it's just the pieces. And I was like, where do I start putting this puzzle together, because I don't have a picture of what it looks like at the end. So that's my question when it comes to leadership. When there's no clear picture for the person, how do they begin to put that puzzle, that leadership puzzle together?
And that's a beautiful question, Reverend Smith. And it's because when you think of puzzles with a cover or the picture that goes to it, that's the traditional leadership. It does not align with today's leadership. Today's leadership needs to be innovative and creative. And in order to do this, this is my mechanism. With any puzzle, whether I have the picture or not, I start with the four corners.
Okay.
Start with the four corners. So for me, the four corners of leadership are one, ethics. You gotta be ethical in every move that you make. But then you also have to elevate your people. There's no I in team. We know that we hear that, but it's true. It's TEAM, not TEAI, no I in team, right? So you have to elevate your team members. But then also you have to encourage them. When people are operating in a space where they feel safe, they feel like they can afford some risk, they can be as creative and throw out something innovative, but they won't be penalized or they won't feel negative. They'll keep throwing those ideas out, and that's where the magic happens. And then the last one is emotional intelligence. We have been missing that element for so long. Leaders think because they have the technical aspect that they can lead. I've worked in HR all my life, and I can tell you that that is not so. Where we normally have leaders who fail, they're normally leaders who are very technical. But in order to pay them more, you have to move them into supervisory, but that's not their skill at all. They have no emotional intelligence, have no idea of how to keen in on what's really going on with an employee or what motivates them or not. So yeah, completing those four corners and then filling in the middle with the puzzle framework.
All right. I like that, the four corners. That will help. Now, are there specific leadership points you believe are often overlooked or undervalued?
Yes, and the one for me is I think that supervisors have a very high issue with delegating. And back in the day, before my time, it was always like, don't share what you know. And I was like, if you don't share what you know, that's going to stifle you. You're going to be in a place of only being highlighted and only being able to engage in what you know. Take everything that I know right now, because I want to learn new things. And I think that's one thing with the one area that's a problem with leaders. But again, I'll double back on that emotional intelligence. People are people. So you have to honor people for not only what they do, but for who they are. And when you understand that, they'll respect you more, and your team as a whole will elevate.
Wow. Yeah, right now I'm reading 2.0 emotional intelligence. Yes. So what are the essential points you desire readers to gain from your section, the leadership puzzle?
Yes. So one of the main components of my puzzle is the puzzle, right? So I love acronyms and I love a play on words. So I developed this puzzle framework, and it was actually years ago. And the P is for participate with a purpose. U, understand to unite. Z, zone into a shared vision. The other Z, zero in on solutions.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Okay.
Because I want people to buy the book.
Okay.
So if you want to know what the L and the E are, now you're going to have to buy the book.
I love that.
We're not going to give you no more.
Absolutely.
But we're giving you enough to whet your appetite to say, I need to buy the book because I want to know what the L and the E are. Okay?
So, absolutely. And I love that you did that. Because here's the foundation of it. So we know not to give away what's in the book. So that's the teaser. But here are the two things to go deeper and to fully answer your question. So when I wrote the book, although it's a leadership book, I purposely purposely wrote it for a leader and a non-leader. Purposely wrote it for that way. For the leader, I wrote it in sense of making sure that they check themselves and see how they operate and see what they do, and also go back to reflect of how you felt with all of your leaders in the past and what they did to help you and what they did to hurt you. And when you go with the things that they did to help you, that's how you round out and you fulfill who you are. And then for that non-leader, if you ever find yourself in a space that's outside of this puzzle framework, find yourself another job.
Ooh.
Find yourself another job. If you're in a place where you're not appreciated, if you're in a place where you're not respected, you are not going to work at your fullest potential. It just cannot happen. You're going to do just enough to make it through. And even if you get a performance of above average, it's still not your potential. And I had learned this lesson from my staff. We had a retreat called the Essential Piece years ago, Reverend Smith. And at the retreat, my staff was like, I said, we're open, everybody's equal. They was like, okay, we want you to respect and treat us as a person, not just the work. We want you to say hello and find out how we're doing each day. That was the pivotal shift in my entire career as it focused on leadership.
Wow, wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Please share your contact information, Ladrine. I mean, a lot of people know where you are, but just in case.
Right, you can catch me through Generation of Speakers. Like, I feel like I'm the co-host. But no, Ladrine Howard Peterson on Facebook, on IG. You can catch me at Do It Delivers. My website is doitdelivers.com. And
let me just for a moment talk about this Do It. Because when I met Ladrine in Bible study, and I was teaching Bible study, and I was asking people about their dreams, their desires, their passions, or the things that they wanted to do. And people got up one by one, and each person was saying, well, you know, I think I would like to write this book, or I think I'd like to do this. I think I'd like to do this. But all they spoke about was what they had a desire to do. And then the Spirit, you know, God is good. And so Ladrine was the last person I called on, not because I thought she had, you know, more than somebody else, but that's just the way it ended. So Ladrine speaks up. And Ladrine asked the question. Ladrine, talk about, what did you ask us?
So basically, I asked everyone, like, what's stopping you from doing what you desire to do? And every time they gave me an excuse, I would give them an answer. I would provide a solution. And as we walked through, I was like, so every one of your dreams can truly be fulfilled. And Reverend Smith was like, where's your business card? I was like, I don't promote in church.
Right.
But it was the beginning of something serious. And Dr. J and I, like, we operate in that space.
Yes.
But when I tell you, it was very divine in terms of how God allowed that to happen.
Yeah, it was such an awakening moment that people just needed to hear, like, okay, just do it. What's stopping you? And so, thank you. All right, let me welcome Dr. Mosley to Generationally Speaking. Dr. Mosley, by way of introduction to our audience, I read in your section that right out of high school, you joined the military. Share with us what was the decision? What made you decide that you were going to join the military?
My dad was in the Army 27 years, and I was a dad girl. I wanted to be just like my father. So my guidance counselor was so upset with me. You got a high grade point average. You've been accepted at the University of North Carolina. What is wrong with you? I said, I want to be all I can be and travel the world just like my dad. So I joined the military because my father was a soldier.
All right. And your section, you wrote, The Art of Elevating Others Through Transformational Leadership. Why did you decide to write on this topic?
Because I am a transformational leader. I'm a practitioner.
Okay.
I was in the military for, 5 years, and my very first day of basic training, I was placed in a leadership role, and we put together wardrobes. When I went to school and got my first degree, second degree, third degree, I realized that I used Bernard Bass's tenets of transformational leadership to run my school. intellectual stimulation, idealized influence, inspirational motivation. So why not write about something that I know about?
That's very true. And you hinted a little bit about your first day of basic training, and you said you discovered your innate leadership skills. And my question is, how did you discover it?
So the drill sergeant came in and said, ladies, and we said, yes, drill sergeant. Says, you've got 8 hours to put together 40 wardrobes. And when you finish, we're going to give you the rest of your gear. Well, I was the youngest person in basic training. I was 18, 10 days out of high school. And so I said, ladies, we can get this done in less than 8 hours. Then we'll have some free times. Who's good with reading directions? And one lady said, oh, I can just look at the picture and say where everything goes. I said, okay, we have 40 girls. I need 3 more just like her. Tall girls, you're going to hold the sides of the wardrobe. And little girls like me, we're going to do the nuts and the bolts. And we finished in 3.5 hours. When the drill sergeant came back to take us to chow, ladies, yes, drill sergeant, how did you finish this job so fast? Somebody said, Baby Mosley gave us roles and responsibilities based upon our strengths.
Correct.
Which is really true. And I said, oh no, Baby Mosley is not going to take credit for something that the team did together. So even though I had the vision of how we can get this done fast, it was a team effort. That's leadership.
But listen, baby Mosley. There was something already that had been birthed, baked inside of you. Even as a youngster, did you notice that you had those leadership skills?
My great-grandmother did, and I spent every summer with her in Pembroke, North Carolina, and she called me T, and she said, T, your gift is your voice, and one day you're going to use your voice to help people. So my great-grandmother told me that my gift was my, now no one ever told me that I had a gift, but then I thought about it. I said, well, I was a Girl Scout. I led my troop.
Okay.
I sang in the church choir. I led the choir. I was in SGA. I was in student government, in high school. So yes, I was a leader. But remember, I'm born in the 50s and raised in the 60s where children were seen and not heard. So I really didn't step out as a leader early on. I just did little bits and pieces growing up.
Listen, baby Mosley, I'm like your grandmama. Your voice,
Yes.
When you start talking, you demand, your voice, as soft as it is, you demand our attention.
Yes.
You know that.
Yes. My gift.
When you think about transformational leadership, I think about the weakest link in an organization. How do you begin to empower those persons?
Well, first, I never identify them as the weakest link.
Okay.
I talk to people, especially when you're new in an organization, what do you think your strengths are? And where do you think you need to grow? And you listen to what they tell you, and then you have to observe what is actually happening. So they might say, oh, my strength is this and I need to grow here. But then when you see it, you realize, oh yeah, that's really his or her strengths, but she really needs to grow here as well. But if you give them the opportunity to identify what it is, the area they need to grow, you can work with that and then add to that.
I like that. So that, oftentimes an organization will say, when they're assessing employees, they will say, well, this employee is weak, so we're not going to worry about this employee. But you're saying the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
Like, let's find out what the strength is of this person that we're identifying as the weakest link. And let's put them in the role where they need to be. I like that.
Yes.
So you talk about emotional intelligence. Do you believe that it's at the core of your personal success?
I think it's a factor in the core of your success, because if you don't have the ability, someone talked about this earlier too, I think our first speaker, you have to be able to manage your emotions and the emotions of those working around you. And you have to have empathy. And some people, they can have compassion, that's feeling sorry, but to be able to feel what someone else is feeling, oh, that's difficult for some people to do. As a former high school principal, I lost 2 students to violence. One kid was shot to death, another kid was beat to death in a park. And I had to come in, I'm the leader of this school, and I still had to run my school. And I was torn, I was hurting inside, but so was my teachers, so was my students. So I observed one teacher that was very loquacious, but she was real quiet. And I pulled her in and I said, this is my emotional intelligence. I said, tell me what's going on, how can I help? She goes, what? I said, I can tell you're different. What can I do to help? And then she talked about how close she was to the student that passed away. And then I shared with her my 15 minutes with him 2 weeks before he passed away. And after we talked for a little minute, she realized that she was going to be okay. I said, do I need to cover your class? The principal, I'm going to cover the English class. No, I can do it now. I'm going back to That's emotional intelligence. That's understanding how your employees feel, how people feel around you, and then making them trust. They learn to trust you because you have that empathy and concern for them. So important.
So is this new? We've talked a lot, in the past. We've always talked about IQ, but this EO, this emotional intelligence that we're talking about now, is that new in the workplace?
It's always been there. EQ is just as important as the IQ. Having that, and I think nowadays, especially with the way of the world, EQ is really coming into play. It's always been there. We just haven't talked about it. But it has always been there. And it's so much a part of leadership that if you need to know what your biases are, you need to know how you make others feel, and you need to look at your leadership style and look at your staff to determine what type of leadership. You might be a transformational leader, but you might also need some direct supervision. Transformation leaders aren't direct supervisors. We have horizontal leadership. But if you have a person that you need to say, okay, Teresa, you need to do this, then you need to do this, then you need to do this. Now tell me what I just said. You need to do that. So it depends on who is in your circle that you're working with.
So in your years of training others, what are some common barriers to transformational leadership?
Resistance to change. Oh my goodness. You come in as a new leader and you have a vision and mission, and you have people, and some that don't want to work for a woman, that work for a man out of their life, or some that are set in their ways. I've been teaching for 25 years. I'm not doing this, right? Resistance to change is a big barrier for transformational leaders. And that's across all platforms.
Okay, Dr. Bryant, resistant to change.
No, she's right on point. Like I'm a change manager practitioner, right? I'm certified in change management, and there's a whole formula to it, right? And technically you can go by the management principles of Kotter, Kotter, right? The 8 principles. You can go by process change management, which is ADKAR, in terms of having awareness and building knowledge. At the beginning, middle, and end of the day, talk to your people. Find out what's their biggest pain points as to why they are fearful of the change. And what I do is I walk in organizations and say, let's look at the opportunities. I see the current state, I've heard you, but just imagine the possibilities of what good looks like and even better looks like, and how you, based on your strengths, can play a role in shifting the change. And when people realize that no one's coming in as a dictator to tell them what that change is, and that they will be part of the solution as a puzzle piece, right, as Ladrine mentioned, it makes a world of difference of getting to that other side. But the other piece too is that I tell them, don't forget your teammate, because guess what? I, as the leader, and the rest of the team, we going on this journey together. So if somebody fall back, you better go back and get your team. Like military, you better go back and get your teammate. We going on this journey together.
Never leave your wingman. She's so right. And it also empowers them to produce more than they're even producing.
Exactly.
Transformational leaders do that. I want to work for her. Yes, I'm going to meet my goal this month. Because they know if you don't meet it, they're going to say, okay, what happened? What can we do? How can I help? That's a transformational leader.
Wonderful. Please share with the audience your contact information, how they can hear more from you.
Yes, I have a website, www.creatingambassadorsofpeace.com, which links to all of my social media, which is Dr. Teresa N. Mosley on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. But if you go to my website, please subscribe to my website.
That's
and
right.
my YouTube channel, Dr. Teresa A. Mosley. It links to everything else.
Hey, did you hear it? She said, please subscribe. I'm going to say the same thing. Please subscribe to Generationally Speaking.
Yes.
I love that. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
All right. Well, let me welcome to the platform now Dr. Idebola Agio. Did I get it close?
Yes.
All right. Well, welcome to Generationally Speaking. Now, let's begin. I'm going to, by way of introduction, audience, I'm going to take Dr. Agio back when she was a 17-year-old student, and she boarded a plane and flew, I know, over 10 hours, more than 10 hours to get to Purdue University. So when you think back of that young girl, 17, and no family, no friends around, and you stepped into America, what assaulted you? What did you take notice of first?
Wow. So, I mean, I actually left home much earlier than that.
Okay.
And I went to England. So I was in England for 3 years before coming to America. So I was already used to being away from home. But I think one thing that stood with me is coming from a different country, millions of miles away, and not having any family, not having any support system, not having any friends, but knowing that you're here for a reason. And knowing that America is seen around the world as the place of opportunity and a place where people realize their vision and their dreams and their aspirations. And that was exactly what I was here to do too. I came here in search of a quality education to pursue my dreams, to my goals of, at the time, wanted to be a doctor. The story kind of changed, but ultimately the goal was really to come here and get a good quality education and to become something that I wanted to be.
All right. You know, for the Black American, the migration that I'm going to share this with you, for the migration that we go through, we leave our homes in the South for these Midwest or all these other places, and we travel to larger cities for better jobs, to attend colleges and universities. But we are undergirded by life lessons that we learned from our parents and our grandparents and our communities. Tell me a little bit about those life lessons that undergirded you as you started your study at Purdue and missing family and friends. But what was it that resonated inside of your spirit to keep you pushing forward?
So I think what's important to note is that it's a responsibility and it's a privilege. Not everybody got a chance to come here. Not everybody got a chance to come and pursue the education in a foreign land, to get better quality of education and to have the vision for a better life. So for me, it was, first of all, it was faith, right? We have to know who we are and know what we're here for. So understanding that my parents have set me here for a reason and knowing that I have the belief that I'm going to pursue and get those things, I think it was important. I think another part of it is the responsibility. Just understanding and knowing that you're here and you can't mess up. It's a privilege. And so people are counting on you to become something so that you can then pave the way for others. So responsibility is part of it. And knowing that, and perseverance, persistence. Because being an international student was not easy. There was a lot to do with visa changes, navigating, not having sponsors, not having mentorship. And so that perseverance and knowing that even when things were tough, even when things changed. I remember I never could go home for any of the breaks.
Right.
You know, when it was breaks, people went home. I always stayed in school. And so that persistence and perseverance through that education and then going from that to graduate school and going the whole 9 yards, it really took believing in yourself and persisting through challenges.
I love that. I love that. Dr. Bryant, when you hear that, what are your thoughts? I know you got a thought about that.
I heard resiliency, right? Resiliency. And sometimes we get so caught up in resiliency, we don't know how to hold back, right? Like we sometimes sacrifice ourselves while we're building that resiliency muscle.
Yeah, I love it. So you wrote the section, Leadership, a call to service and transform. What was your calling to this topic of service and transformation?
So it goes back to that whole thing of, like I said, coming here, coming to this country, knowing that I've been given that opportunity and that I have to pave the way for others. And that's something that I do in my leadership. I try to create that space for other women like me, especially women of African descent, who I also know they've come here for a better life, and also navigating the challenges of life in a different country. I'm trying to create that space for them so that they also feel heard, they feel seen, and they also know they can do it, right? Because when we come here and we don't have that support system, sometimes we're not sure if we can actually achieve those dreams. And so understanding that they can do it because they see someone else ahead of them who's doing it.
That support system, that's something that we all seek after, that we all need, that support system. And recognizing that there are others who are coming behind us, that we need to be able to give them a hand up. Dr. Bryant.
Lift while you climb.
That's right.
You're saying it, right?
Yeah.
Lift while you climb. You're paving the way.
Yeah, yeah. And that happens. And I think your book is showing this. So I read that for a period you served as epidemiologist in the public health sector, working on the AIDS epidemic. And we know at one time AIDS was really running rampant, and so many people died from AIDS. Share with us how you made the decision to work on this worldwide epidemic when at the time people were really running away from working with AIDS because they were really afraid.
Well, life is a journey, and this was part of my journey too. So after grad school, I got the opportunity to go to Nigeria. It was full circle, coming from Nigeria to come here to school, and then getting the opportunity to go back to serve, like you said, in an epidemic, using the skills that I've gained here to go back to serve. And it really was the best decision I ever made because I got a chance to go back home as an adult. I left, before I was a teenager. And so being able to go back and really be able to give back in ways that I never even envisioned. And honestly, it was the best experience I've had even till now. And I have this dream of going back and still doing that development work because ultimately it's that service. That's why we're all here. Like Dr. Bryan said earlier, she got to that point where she started to say, what is this all about? Yeah. What is it all about? For each and every one of us, we have to look within and identify what is this all about? And really understanding what are we here to do? What are our gifts that we're trying to use to serve? Who are we here to serve? So for me, that was a practical experience, being on ground, going into the field, testing folks for HIV, giving them that treatment, recommending them to a treatment, and literally seeing people testing positive on a daily, but being able to give them that hope that they too can live and they too can pursue their dreams despite this deadly disease. That was, to me, one of the light bulb changing moments of my career.
I saw a movie or a documentary or something about persons working in these AIDS, in these areas where there was the AIDS were really wiping out whole communities. When you went back and worked in those areas, what was it that gave you that sense of calmness that says, I'm not going to become infected, that I know what I'm doing?
Well, we take a lot of precautions in the field. We wear gloves, we make sure that we're not touching contaminated stuff. So all that procedure was in place. So there was no fear of contacting, but just knowing that you're making a difference and just knowing. And really, it was the vision of one of the U.S. presidents that created this. And for me, that was true leadership in action, seeing somebody's vision and empathy, being able to, put that money out there to help other people have life and have hope was really important. As a leader, to learn that vision is paramount to leadership. You need to know, you have to have a vision, and then you have to create a space where people feel safe and people have hope. And that was one of the things that I took away from that experience.
And how were you welcomed back into your community?
Oh, that was interesting. That was very interesting because even though I'm Nigerian, I've been gone for so many years at that point, and I had a slight different accent. And so it was tough to kind of go back in and say I'm a Nigerian, but you don't quite sound like a Nigerian. So it's one of those, like, you're trying to thread, I'm a Nigerian, but I'm not a Nigerian. So there were some spaces that I was a Nigerian, there's some spaces that I wasn't a Nigerian. So it depends on which one was working for me.
The code switching, huh?
In your writing, you share the challenges of being a woman of color. in a male, non-melanated environment, but you grew. And I love that you grew. Share with us how you made the challenges go from a negative to a positive in your personal development.
Yeah, no, that was big. So after that experience in Nigeria, and I realized there were certain decisions that were being made in the field that I would make differently. So I decided to come back to the U.S. and pursue my PhD. So that was actually the pivot for me there. So I went through this program, 5 years full-time program, and got this dream job. I still in that dream job, but somewhere along the line, about 5 years into it, I started to feel stuck and stagnant. And so really, this is what I've trained to do literally for years. And now I didn't feel like I was moving forward, and I couldn't quite figure out how to navigate. I was a young mom of 3 kids. I think 1, 4, and 8 years old at the time, and I was trying to climb the career ladder, and in a huge organization. My organization is about 18,000 people. So it was really tough to figure out how do you advance while being a wife and a mom and really, doing all of these things that we're all doing. And for me, I also looked for women that looked like me in my organization, and I couldn't find because I needed a support system. I needed someone to help me navigate. I really could not find. And it turned out I have to go within. I really have to discover my strengths. Who am I? And again, what am I here for? It keeps going back to that question. What am I here for? Am I just here to go to work, get paid, feed my kids? Or am I here for more? And I knew that I was here for more. I know that I'm here for more. And so I had to tap into my potential, into all of my gifts. That was my pivot into leadership. Even though I was a scientist, and I'm still a scientist, and I enjoy the science, I realized that I really enjoy mentorship. And I really enjoy helping people grow. And so I pivot into leadership in my role, and I try as much as possible to create a space where my team feels seen, heard, because that was what I did not have. That was what I could not have. I did not feel seen, and I did not feel heard. And I just worked harder and harder. And you know how that goes. You work harder. It becomes a hamster wheel. You just day in, day out. So that was my experience, and that's what led me to where I am today, both in my role as an epidemiologist and a leader, but also in my organization, Empowering Initiatives. That's also what I do, help women, career women, professional women, to have a space, a safe space where they can collaborate, where they can connect, where we can support each other and build that network of supportive women for each other.
So how has that, how many women, do you have numbers of how many women you've been able to help along the way?
So in my network, I do events once a year, so kind of, we tackle different topics. We just had one last week on financial empowerment, and it was amazing. And so I have over 200 women in that network. And really what we do is make sure they're connected so we can keep supporting each other in between those events. Because like I said, I came here with no support system. So I want to make sure that other women don't stay without a support system, especially women of African descent. They don't stay without a support system. In that group, we mentor women that are also of African descent that are growing up, especially the ones in public health. That's my field. And so one lady saw me one time, she said, Adabola, you're the first Black epidemiologist I've seen. And that meant a lot to me, that she could look up and she can see me. She just got into a PhD. She just got accepted into a PhD program where I wrote a letter of recommendation. So that gives me joy, just knowing that now these women can look up and they see me.
Yeah, I love that. For so many conversations we have when it comes to women, it's like we can't work together, that we can't respect each other. So to hear that you have an organization of over 200 women where you're building and that you all are working together, I think that is worth us having more conversation about. And it's really more of what we should be about. This. And it goes back to your topic of a call to service and transform, because that's what you're doing. Yeah. So what life lessons would you share with another young student about embracing their journey?
Well, life is a journey, first of all, but it's not a straight path.
Yeah.
And it's different for each one of us. But I think it's important that we each embrace our journey, our unique skills, our unique gifts, our unique talents, and really figure out who are we here to serve. Why are we put on this earth? What is our purpose? And know that there's a leader in each one of us. And how do you serve with your gifts? So really never giving up. Keep growing, keep learning, keep pivoting, even when you hit that plateau, like I did in my career, hit that plateau, and that's your internal compass to know that there's growth somewhere else. You may have hit your plateau, but pivot in a different direction of growth. Keep growing, keep learning, and keep identifying what you're here for and who you're here to serve.
And when you talk about pivoting, what would you say to a person to overcome that fear of pivoting? Because we know I'm stuck. I've been in the same position for 5 years now, and I need to think about it. It's not fulfilling. It's not where I want to be. It's just paying the bills. So how do we move? What would you say to a person to move past that fear of pivoting to the next place that I always say God is calling you to?
Yeah. I mean, I truly believe that who we are is already in us. So we just need to discover who we are. I feel like when you are at that place, you just need to dig deep and find yourself, find your gifts, and be open and believe in yourself, because that fear is really, it's a lack of belief, and faith is the antidote to fear. So you have to believe in yourself that you too can do it. And when I was writing my book, one way that I did that was I had affirmations. I had affirmations on my wall. And so when I got to that point where I thought, who dare to hear my voice? I mean, who would want to hear my voice? Who would want to read my book, right? Who am I to even write a book? It was literally reading those affirmations. I have a voice. My voice matters. I can make a difference. I matter. I'm here for greatness. Reading all of those things kept me going through those fears.
I love that, those daily affirmations, reading that over and over. Thank you so much for sharing. How can folk contact you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Adebola Jao. My website is empoweringinitiatives.net. And I'm on Facebook as Adebola Jao. I'm on LinkedIn as Adebola Jao.
Okay. Well, let me welcome Dr. Rhonda Wood to Generationally Speaking. And she writes a section that's titled, you are ready, Lead with Courage, Live with Purpose, and Leave a Legacy of Empowerment. Now that's a healthy ask. Share with us, Dr. Wood, your formative years and your professional training.
Absolutely. So I had two very loving parents who are now both in heaven. And after their transition, I raised three of my siblings. And so when I was asked by the amazing Dr. Jennifer to be a part of Step Into Leadership Greatness, a big part of what I wanted to write about was my leadership in terms of raising my siblings and the different things we navigated in that journey, and then also in my professional career as well, and figuring out how to integrate all of those components.
So how old were you when you took on that task of raising your siblings?
Right, so when I took on raising my siblings, I was about 18 years old.
Wow.
So I had just graduated from high school, had barely a year of college under my belt, and I found out that my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, stage 4. And so after she transitioned, I took on the responsibility of raising three of my siblings, and it just so happened, not even a coincidence, that I actually worked at a law firm.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was able to get a lot of guidance from the law firm about how to apply for guardianship and how to, basically step into that role and do it in a way that would support my siblings through adulthood.
So did you put your college on the sidelines until they were graduated?
Absolutely. So I graduated from high school in 1990, and I didn't finish my undergrad until 1999. So during that time, I was working, taking care of my siblings, and then going to school part-time.
So when you think back now, what was it that kept you positive and moving forward? Because I can imagine that there were times that the weight got heavy.
100%. So a huge part of what kept me going was, one, my faith. I believed that I was provided strength just through my faith in God, and believing that this was something that God wanted me to do. I know a lot of people say, why would you make a sacrifice of that level? You are a young adult, you're sacrificing your young adulthood. But I believe that that was a big part of what was part of my calling. And I learned so much from those experiences. And to this day, you know, family is very important to me. Community is very important to me. My siblings are all very close. But I believe that that was a big part of my purpose and what God was calling me to do. And has led me to what I'm doing even now today.
Wow. Dr. Bryant, did you have any idea of that she had experienced this in her life?
I have not, right? I've heard one portion of her story, and you and I kind of talked about this on break. Like, when you look at a person, some people automatically think that they have it all together, right? They don't think about the intersectionalities of each person, that they come with different stories, different things have impacted their life and how they show up. And you know, this is incredible because, again, another common theme of resiliency is showing up and popping up. Like, what does it mean to care for my family? What does it mean to care for the community? And in that time when she was taking care of her family, her leadership was showing up then.
You begin your section, Dr. Wood, speaking about climbing the corporate ladder and being successful, yet underneath, you said the surface, you said a storm was raging. When did you become acutely aware of the struggle, and how did you finally put a title on it, identify what it really was?
Right, so I felt like I had different components of my life. I felt like I had my personal life at home, I had my sort of my corporate life at work, and then I had another sort of way in which I showed up in the community. When I would leave home and come to work, I felt like I had to show up a certain way. My idea, I believe I sort of romanticized corporate leadership. So I felt like, oh, leadership is wearing a suit and heels and makeup and looking like you are always in charge, in control, you know, no struggles, you got it all together. And I felt like that was the way you were supposed to present yourself, particularly when you are working in an environment. So this corporate environment that I worked in, I realized, wow, you know, I'm one of the very few young people here, one of the very few females in this particular department, and the only person of color. So I felt like, okay, Rhonda, don't blow it. Don't make them think that they should have bet on someone else. So I felt like I worked so hard to get there. So, you know, you worked so hard to get here, so let's now prove that you belong here. Well, what happened is I felt like I wasn't being my true self. I was one way at home, and then I would show up and I felt like I took on a whole different identity. And so what that led to was I felt like there were moments where I'm like, man, this is stressful. Whew. It's a lot of work when you're not able to be authentic. It's exhausting. And so it showed up as overwhelm. It showed up as stress. It showed up as, you know, when you're feeling like, oh, I got this. And I'm like, okay, well, let's give her some more. So the stress, the overwhelm, feeling overworked, then you have the stressed out and burned out.
Well, you know, historically, Black Americans, we have always walked in multiple lanes of identity. In the workplace, when we come to work, we have a professional language, and we switch to that. When we're with our friends, we have this slang language that we 100%. Switch to. And then when we are with our family, we have another language, these nuances and these sayings that we grow up hearing. At what point did you sense your world was unraveling, and what help did you seek?
So I felt like my world was unraveling when I felt like I had to have a different identity for each area of my life. And what helped me was to not feel like I had to compartmentalize each one, but that I can integrate them, that I can just be me in all the different areas of my life. when that doesn't happen, then it shows up as the stressed out and the burnt out and the overwhelmed. And so I was getting to the point, particularly because I had lost both of my parents young, so I did not have the parental guidance at a young age that a lot of people have. So not only was I trying to figure out, okay, what is my identity, but I felt like I needed some support in those areas going into adulthood. And so one of the things that I did, I was like, you know what? I know it's so stigmatized, but let me get some support with my mental health. Let me get some support with the stress. Let me get some support with the mental health. And that led to me unpackaging and unveiling and realizing I can be me. I don't always have to show up as strong. And then through the healing that took place, I was able to be a better leader in the different areas of my life. A true, authentic leader in the different areas of my life.
Dr. Bryant.
She said a mouthful.
How do we integrate just being me? Woo! Just being me. How do we integrate that?
She talked about doing that homework.
Yeah.
Right? Like I had to do the homework between executive coaches and a therapist, and even in my therapy session, my therapist saying, Jen, you already rushing to problem solving. I just want you to feel.
Yes, exactly.
I just need you to feel, right? And for you to become more comfortable with who you are, right? You don't have to be perfect. Accepting who you are, your stories made you who you are today. The makeup, the composition, the trauma, the goodness that happens in your life. All of those pieces make up who you are. In my last corporate job, I felt you, in terms of how you show up. And I remember feeling like I am so exhausted. And I couldn't put my finger on why am I so exhausted? I'm a high energy person. But it goes back to showing up in a certain way, right? Code switching and saying, you know what? I'm tired. I had enough. I'm done. But there were pieces of me in which I could show up authentically me, which I loved. It was certain aspects of my job. So, yeah.
Do you think that it is a Black issue of this identity of being who we are? Or do you think, I'm just asking.
So, funny that you say that because, come on now, we're going to go back for a little bit. I'm 55, I'll be 56 in June.
Right now.
When I was growing up, I don't know about you, but what happens in your household, what?
Stays in the household.
We had to go out looking picture perfect, as if nothing is going on. We got it all together. But we take that into our professional workplace, and we could be suffering in silence because, like one of the other authors, Dr. Adebola, talked about how she didn't see anyone else to look like her. Same for me. I think all of us probably could say in my 20s, rising from clerk typist to an associate director. There weren't many who looked like me, certainly not in newly created roles I was able to be a part of. So I had to mask certain parts of my life, like caring for my mom with schizophrenia and bipolar, or the situations, personal situations I may have been in. And so, yes, I think as a color, we've had to hide it because of personal stories. And a lot of times I help my clients get rid of that story, right? Because we did work in this world where we're constantly proving ourselves. And once you get into this space of designing, through God, right? But designing what your next chapter looks like, you don't care, right? You don't care because you get to play a part of what that new life will look like, regardless of color. The other piece, I will say this, is that in my past corporate life that I walked away from last October, I took on a role, a huge role, right? I always say you're interviewing every day. And I took on this huge role when they approached me of overseeing 24,000 women. Intersectionality of different looks. I was the first Black woman to sit in that leadership role. Part of my yes to them was, I will take this role if I can bring others who look like me to the table. That was a big ask. I was bold enough to ask it. They said absolutely. So I made it my business 2 years, almost 3 years, to do that, to bring them to the table. That's part of the legacy building. And so, yes, as a color, yes. But at the same time, what I just mentioned, don't be afraid to go to your allies. Don't be afraid to go to those people who don't look like you.
Right.
They don't know how to help you unless you ask.
Exactly.
So I start asking. I started asking. Only thing they could do was tell me no. Yeah, I came with a lot of sass.
Dr. Wood, you found your purpose through your pain. What life lessons can you share today on resiliency, hope, and mental health awareness?
So when I think about finding your purpose in the pain, first of all, when we think about pain, it's something that we want to run away from, But what I realize, and I think what a lot of people realize, is instead of running away from the pain, is to ask yourself, okay, well, what is the lesson in this? What is this teaching me? Why am I going through this? I think sometimes when we go through things, difficult things, struggles, the first thing we do is, oh my God, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? But if you sit still long enough and if you listen long enough, that reason will be revealed to you. It will manifest, and you're like, oh, okay, that's why I went through this. It's just something that you're being ushered into, a new journey, a new experience, new lessons, new blessings, or something that you're being protected from in many cases. And so what I have learned from that is that one amazing thing that I learned is just how every experience that I've ever had. I mean, there are times when I'm like, well, I'm not sure if this was the right thing to do. I'm not sure if I should have done that, or maybe I should have done this thing differently. But how God just uses everything. He uses every experience in our lives and just does great things with it. And we can never feel like we're not good enough, God can't use us, my past is so unusual, so difficult, or, again, I talked about how I romanticized what I thought leadership was. I thought it was this picture-perfect person showing up doing these picture-perfect things. And I'm like, no, it can show up as a big, sloppy, wet duck. And God can still do amazing things with that. And so, when you have those uncertainties and those painful moments, and you don't have that connection where you know it's going to bring about something forth, it can show up as, it can bring forth anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic, overwhelm, stress, all of those things that I talked about. But on the other side of that, right, you see the blessings and the greatness that comes out of it. Wow. And you feel like, wow, this is what it was all about, and that it was so 100% worth it because of the things that God has shown me through perseverance and the resilience.
Wow. Well, share with the audience your contact information, how they can catch up with you.
Sure, really easy to remember. So I'm Dr. Rhonda M. Wood. My website is drrhondamwood.com, and my handle on all social media platforms is, you guessed it, at Dr. Rhonda M. Wood.
Well, Dr. Bryant, what an amazing anthology you have quilted for every reader to embody how to step into leadership with greatness amplifying the pitfalls we face in the business arena, but highlighting the need to assess our value, our personal and professional skills, the importance of mental health, and with each chapter concluding with a pathway to success. Thank you so much. Final words.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm full. This was such a great interview. And I love the way that each person showed up as their unique leadership style came into play. And I'm very proud of what we've done and the impact that we're making. And I will go back to something I previously said. We're no longer living by default.
Whew.
We're no longer living by the stories that folks have said to us. We're no longer living by the ugliness that was done to us. We're now in this position of living presently in this moment, embracing what God has given to us, our gifts, our talents. It is not all about us. It's about what our gifts and talents can do to lift others as we climb.
All right, you heard it. Yeah. Our mission here at Generationally Speaking is to always inspire. To inspire you to go after your dreams, your passions that God has placed inside of you, and then to bring information to you, because with information comes power. And with the inspiration and information, you know what's going to happen. Transformation. See you next week.